Hello, hello, hello again. Welcome back to Two Mates on Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons. As always, is my partner Nathan Kwan, and with us again is Kevin Hahn, our resident NBA expert. Speaking of which, Nathan, was there anything big that happened this week? There weren't that many games.
Yeah, this week was the NBA trade deadline. The biggest move was the Sacramento Kings, hours after the NBA All-Star game ended, trading DeMarcus Cousins, Pelicans, for a package including Buddy Hield, Tyreke Evans, Langston Galloway, and some draft picks. And so, Kevin, what was your first initial thoughts on the trade?
Yeah, so in recent news, Omri Caspi was also included in that deal, and he was recently waived by the Pelicans because of a broken thumb. And the Pelicans signed guard Reggie Williams also. So, yeah, in terms of the trade, the Pelicans are currently sitting at the 11th seed in the West, and they're 2.5 games behind the Nuggets at the 8th seed. So I think obviously adding DeMarcus makes the Pelicans front court arguably the best in the league. You got two superstar big men, both averaging over 27 points and 10 rebounds a game. But the problem is they're now extremely depleted at the guard positions with the loss of, as you mentioned, Buddy Hield, Tyreke Evans, and Galloway. So the remaining guards on the Pelicans are Drew Holiday, Tim Frazier, and Etuan Moore. So the Pelicans might need to call up some players from the D-League at this rate. Yeah, one of the Pelicans' biggest problems this season has been their bench production, which has now gotten worse as a result of this trade. And I don't think the Pelicans will have enough depth to close out games, even with the addition of Cousins, because their backcourt is probably now one of the worst in the league, and they'll continue to have trouble defending other teams' three-point shooters. But overall, I think Cousins will definitely help the Pelicans in their rebounding and scoring, but I don't think they have enough manpower right now to compete with most teams. In the end, I think the Nuggets will still win the 8th seed, but in the offseason, the Pelicans need to seriously consider surrounding DeMarcus and AD with more talent.
You mentioned that you don't think the Pelicans can make the playoffs, but I guess what is their long-term play here? What do you see really the direction of both New Orleans and Sacramento, which had a superstar in Cousins and decided to move in a different direction?
There was obviously some issues with DeMarcus and Sacramento. Like, they didn't get along with management. Actually, Buddy Hield looked pretty good in his first game as a King. They won, and it looks like Vivek is looking for a lot of shooters on his team. So we'll see how that pans out. But in terms of the Pelicans and them moving forward, I think the end game is to make the Western Conference Finals. So they want to surround DeMarcus and AD with more talent, and hopefully they'll look for a big free agent during the offseason. But yeah, we'll see.
I mean, to me, this just sort of like screams out that they want to do everything in their power to impress Anthony Davis in order to keep him. I mean, the biggest problem for New Orleans ever since they were able to draft Anthony Davis with the first overall pick a few years ago was that they had never been able to surround him with superstars. Now they're finally trying to show to him that, like, hey, we can get you someone like Boogie Cousins, and we believe in you, and we want you to stay and build an actual contender here in NOLA. I mean, that to me is the biggest thing. And at the very least, it shouldn't be, well, I won't say it's like incredibly easy to be able to build a bench through free agency. They should be able to, considering not only is a bench just mostly just, you have to go out and just get role players who know their role and are able to come at a fairly cheap price, but they should be able to at least attract some decent talent with the front court duo that they have now. I mean, again, like what Kevin said, they definitely have hurt their not only their bench but their front court. I mean, Drew Holiday, I know a lot of people have said he's not all that good. I mean, I think he's at worst an average point guard in this league, but at the same time, like, he can't carry that load of just being like pretty much like the sole ball handler. And so like what Kevin said, I'm not too high on NOLA getting the 8th seed this year, but I wouldn't completely rule it out, especially since considering that Anthony Davis and Boogie Cousins are still fairly young, and I've seen stranger things, especially since this is not the show, but like I've seen stranger things when it comes to teams coming out of nowhere and getting that 8th seed, specifically last year with the Mavs somehow pulling that out of their butts down the stretch. In terms of Sacramento, it definitely looks like they're trying to like build up on shooters. Buddy Hield got 16 points in his debut for the Kings the other night, and so it's looking like he should be fairly decent. He's been far better than I personally expected prior to the draft. His 3-point shooting has transitioned fairly decently to the NBA, but it definitely seems like Sacramento, while they got a decent deal in getting Buddy Hield and the New Orleans first and second round pick for this year, as well as getting back Tyreke Evans, it feels like they could have gotten a little bit more going forward. Do you think they could have gotten more, Quan?
I can't speculate on the trade market. So there are comments that came out that Vlade Divac was saying that basically they had a better deal on the table. And there are rumors that DeMarcus Cousins' agent kind of meddled in those trade. He was telling teams that Cousins wouldn't sign with them long term, basically hurt his trade market. And so that's an issue that is a wider NBA issue on the influence of agents in these trade deals. The reason being is Cousins lost out on $30 million by getting traded from Sacramento. But in the big picture, when I first heard about this trade, I didn't like it for either team. So New Orleans, like they got the superstar to pair with Anthony Davis, but as Kevin mentioned, they are so depleted in the backcourt that I don't really see them making the playoffs. And even if they did, they have no realistic chance of advancing past the first round. And you can try hitting the free agent market, but the way the NBA is going nowadays, you don't really see teams with two bigs playing together. I think Sacramento, I watched their highlights of their game against Denver the other night, and it could be addition by subtraction or it just could be early returns. But since they've lost Rudy Gay and they've played a couple of games without Cousins because he was suspended, that team has played a lot better in moving the ball together. A lot of young players in bigs like Willie Cauley-Stein, who put up 29 and 10 in first extended minutes since Cousins was gone. You have Scala Bissiere, who's a big name prospect out of Kentucky that didn't get a lot of playing time last year in college, but was one of the most highly recruited big men in the country. And so I think there's a lot of potential there.
I think the Kings ownership group with Vivek Ranadive have been really poorly run. From the amount of head coaches that they've gone through to the number of general managers. You look at what they've done with DeMarcus Cousins, they went from a public stance of we're not going to trade him at all to turning around 180 degrees to we're going to trade him in a matter of weeks. The way Vivek Ranadive just changes his mind on a whim is really troubling if you're a Kings fan.
For sure. There's one more point that I wanted to bring up that I saw in a tweet somewhere, and it has to do more with like the Kings. So basically, the Kings went from having Hassan Whiteside, DeMarcus Cousins, Tyreke Evans, and possibly Isaiah Thomas all on the same team to just only having Tyreke Evans and Buddy Hield in like a first and a second. And I think that's just sort of like a very interesting thing, how it's just like Sacramento Kings seem to be very good at like scouting prior to the draft, but then like not being able to recognize the talent or develop the talent afterwards.
Well, Kevin mentioned Denver is still in the 8th seed. They made a trade earlier in the week, and we didn't talk about this last week, but they traded Jusuf Nurkic and a first-round pick to the Portland Trailblazers for Mason Plumlee and a second-round pick. Kevin, what do you think of that deal?
I think it's a pretty solid pickup for the Nuggets. I mean, Plumlee should be a pretty decent backup center behind Jokic, he's having a monster year. And I think the Nuggets pretty much have the 8th seed on lock as of now. I mean, the only teams behind them that have a chance are possibly the Kings, the Pelicans. But yeah, I think the Nuggets have the 8th seed on lock. And that first round matchup against the Warriors is going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like this trade for the Nuggets. And I also actually kind of like it for the Trailblazers as well, too. I mean, like, not only were they able to pick up Jusuf Nurkic, who actually is a actually did fairly well in his debut. I think he got a double-double in his first game with the Trailblazers, but they also pick up a first, and that helps towards their rebuilding. Like the Trailblazers have had, are still have a very good young core with Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum, and so they should be able to put together a fairly solid team next year.
Yeah, I think Denver is really going for it. They're very well coached under Mike Malone, and as Kevin mentioned, they have a superstar budding in Jokic, and so I think they've missed the playoffs the last couple of years, and so that would be huge for that team and that fan base. I think Portland, they get a prospect in Nurkic who really hasn't played a lot behind Jokic, and so he has a lot of upside, definitely more than Plumlee. And getting that first round pick, in addition, this has kind of been a lost year for them. As we've talked about them earlier this year, they've just been so bad defensively and on the road. And so if they miss the playoffs, they at least get an additional first round pick out of this. Denver also made a kind of a minor deal. They got Roy Hibbert from the Bucks for a second round pick. And so that's going to be a more front court depth for that team. But let's talk about some teams in the East. So Washington made to their bench. They got Bogdanovich and Chris McCullough from the Nets in exchange for Marcus Thornton, Andrew Nicholson, and a first-round pick. What do you think of that deal, Kevin?
I think it was a pretty solid pickup for the Wizards. I can't really say how the deal will fare out because I haven't really seen Marcus Thornton or Nicholson play, but I think Bojan Bogdanovic, he's a pretty solid backup at the shooting guard position behind Bradley Beal. And I think the Wizards, they're going to probably have the second seed come playoff time. John Wall has been really solid point guard in the East. I think he's probably the best point guard. He's averaging 23 points and 11 assists. Bojan Bogdanovic is definitely going to help with their offense, and I think it's a solid pickup for the Wizards. Can't really say on the Nets side of things, but we'll see.
Well, the Nets getting any sort of first-round pick at this point, is a plus for them. But that being also said, I absolutely agree. The Wizards definitely look a heck of a lot stronger heading forward. I mean, really the biggest weakness for this Wizards team prior to the trade deadline was their depth, because pretty much they've been able to fill out their entire starting lineup with early first-round picks, but outside of pretty much Otto Porter, Bradley Beal, and John Wall, all their first-round picks are either not on the team or have been traded away. I mean, the last time that one of the bigger names that they whiffed on was Jan Vesely, who pretty much the biggest thing that I can remember him is that he had a hot girlfriend at the NBA draft and kissed her after he got drafted. This is a very solid starting lineup, and being able to reinforce that bench going forward with someone like Bogdanovich, who should be a good scorer going forward, should help put this team. Maybe they don't necessarily upend the Cavaliers, but that should make for a very exciting series if they do meet up in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think your point about the Nets is right on. They're still reeling from the effects of that Boston trade. So anytime they can fix is a positive. For Washington, Bogdanovich is going to help a lot with bench. He can also play make a little bit. And so I think Washington's been one of the hottest teams in the league since the first part of the year. And so I think this definitely helps them and puts them in position to potentially get that 2 seed. Another team that has made a bunch of moves that have tried to put them at the 2 seed is the Toronto Raptors. They got Serge Ibaka from Orlando a couple weeks ago, and they made another deal.
They got PJ Tucker from the Phoenix Suns for Jared Sullinger and 2 second-round picks.
So, PJ Tucker, the Raptors were actually targeting PJ Tucker for a while now because they were looking for a defender who could guard LeBron, and apparently PJ Tucker fit that mold. So it's a pretty good acquisition for the Raptors. They also added Ibaka. They traded Terrence Ross to the Magic for him. And the Raptors they've kind of fallen off. They're 4th in the East. But the addition of Ibaka and PJ Tucker should help them from a defensive standpoint, especially if they're planning to face the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals, if they get there.
Agreed. PJ Tucker, former UT alum, he not only is he a fairly solid defender, but he's also a solid scorer as well. So not only does he come in and help with their defense, but also in some semblance, like not only like replaces like the offensive production that Terrence Ross was giving the team, but to some extent like kind of surpasses it too, because he's got that veteran savvy. And I mean, obviously adding Serge Ibaka to that team. I mean, this starting five with DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry, PJ Tucker, I assume, Serge Ibaka, and Jonas Valanciunas. I mean, just a real solid starting five right there. And I look like the top four teams in the East. It looks to have some very fun basketball come playoff time. I will say that. Like it's going to be a real good time to be an NBA fan or a basketball fan in general.
Yeah, I think this just proves that Masai Ujiri is one of the best GMs in the league. He built that Denver team into a Western Conference Finals team after the Carmelo trade, and he's done the same thing with Toronto. These two deals with Serge Ibaka and PJ Tucker really show that Toronto needs to win now.
Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan are in their prime now, and so they need to be in a position where they're contending for championships, and they can't wait. Serge Ibaka and PJ Tucker will really help out on the defensive end, where they've really struggled, and which has resulted in them dropping to fourth in the East. Also in the mix in the East is the Atlanta Hawks. They sit fifth right now. They made a deal to get Ersan Ilyasova from the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for Thiago Splitter and 2 second-round draft picks. How do you see Ilyasova fitting in with the Hawks, Kevin?
Yeah, Ilyasova definitely will add some depth to their front court, but to me, this trade is mostly about the 2 second-round draft picks, because Ilyasova wasn't really much of a factor on the Sixers, and Thiago Splitter hasn't really played at all for the Hawks. So it looks like the Sixers are just trying to hoard those draft picks for the future.
Yeah, it wasn't the only time that the Sixers traded for a veteran center that they ended up waiving. I mean, we'll talk about that one a bit later, but yeah, you'd like to think that Atlanta was able to improve with this. I mean, they've been fairly decent with rebuild, helping to keep their team afloat, but especially after like trading away Jeff Teague, placing him with Dennis Schroeder, but at the same time, like it just seems like going back to what we mentioned earlier about how strong the Eastern Conference is becoming. I mean, I don't think they really did enough to keep themselves in contention for even making it to the Western Conference Finals. It's going to take a strong like otherworldly emergence somehow in order to go do it.
Yeah, Atlanta's a team that they're so young in the backcourt. Dennis Schroeder is his first year starting at point guard, and he's done fairly well. Kent Bazemore, they gave a lot of money to in the offseason. He's kind of had a disappointing year, in my opinion. And Malcolm Delaney, I think, has had his moments, and Tim Hardaway as well, most notably that comeback against the Rockets. A couple of teams that didn't make moves that a lot of rumors were out there were Boston and Indiana. So Boston has all those assets, and Paul George was out there, Jimmy Butler was out there, and Boston doesn't pull the trigger. What do you make of that, Kevin?
Yeah, so there were a lot of talks of Celtics using their picks and assets to prepare a good package to either get Paul George or Jimmy Butler. But yeah, it looks like it didn't fall through. It looks like the Celtics are going to wait it out during the offseason. They might have a better chance to grab those two. And maybe the packages that just came back weren't appealing enough for them to pull the trigger. But yeah, apparently Paul George isn't too happy that the Pacers shopped him around during the trade deadline. And it may impact his decision to join another team in the offseason. There were reports that George is strongly considering joining the Lakers. And having Magic Johnson as the new president of basketball operations for the Lakers should be an added bonus. Yeah, apparently the only teams that Paul George would consider signing with long-term are either the Pacers or the Lakers. And given how the Pacers are trying to trade him at the deadline indicates that his future in Indiana is in question.
Yeah, that just seemed kind of kind of out of nowhere with Larry Bird just like trying to float that out there with the press about like him being interested with trading Paul George. I mean, to me, like when I first heard the rumors, it just sounded like they're just trying to like find out like what they could possibly get for him, but like that they would never actually go through with it. But I mean, if this really does negatively affect Paul George and his decision on whether or not he'd actually stay in Indiana, from what I can tell, I mean, obviously I'm not like a trained psychologist, so this is just sort of like from like my impressions. I mean, like he's someone that values loyalty a lot, and which is the reason why he's deciding between either like staying with the team that drafted him and which he's had pretty much for the team that he's played his entire like life for so far, versus going back home and playing for the hometown team. If this ruins that relationship with them, then I think Larry Bird has really shot himself in the foot by allowing that to go out there. And I think even though Boston, I feel might have been better served trading for someone like Jimmy Butler or Paul George. I mean, there was no way that they could have really lost at the deadline, because even if they decided not to trade for someone to help with the push to try to get past Cleveland. I mean, even still, like, I mean, no offense to the people that they have or the people that they could have gotten, but I mean, like, it would have taken someone who's pretty much another superstar in order for them to have a chance to get past the Cavs in the East. And by standing pat, like at the very worst, they could end up just like getting the first overall pick for this year's draft, and which, by the way, should be a fairly strong draft, especially at the top. But yeah, what's your take, Quan?
Yeah, so Indiana is really in an interesting situation because they have said that they want to keep Paul George long term. Superstars don't grow on trees, and to have one in a small market like Indiana, I think you don't want to see him leave. I think Bird is in a situation where he wants to improve the team so that Paul George wants to stay there because he wants to win a championship. And so he wants to do that, but he also has to balance the fact that George could be an unrestricted free agent, and you don't want to lose somebody like him for nothing. I think Boston and Pat, I think it's a smart decision. I think they have the chips in their favor, and they can always make moves in the offseason. They could also just take one of those superstar point guards and make a decision on Isaiah Thomas and whether or not you want to stick with him long term or you make another deal that way. Right now, I think Boston, they have a lot of young players, and Cleveland is still kind of the favorite. Even if they would have gotten somebody like Butler or George, I think Cleveland still would have been the favorite to move on to the NBA Finals. And so I think Pat, is smart for the long term, and I wouldn't doubt Danny Ainge and his pedigree and his decision making. So let's move on to the Western Conference. Oklahoma City got better. They got Taj Gibson and Doug McDermott in a second-round pick from the Chicago Bulls for Cameron Payne, Joffrey Laverne, and Anthony Morrow. What is Chicago doing, Kevin?
I have no idea what Chicago is doing. It's kind of unclear if they're trying to win now or rebuild. I think they're trying to target somewhere in the middle, but giving up Taj Gibson and Doug McDermott, which are key pieces in their rotation, and not trying to give up Jimmy Butler, it really doesn't add up. I think the Thunder are clearly the winners of this trade. Taj Gibson adds defense and rebounding to the Thunder front court alongside Steven Adams. And Doug McDermott provides another scoring option for the Thunder alongside Russell Westbrook. Yeah, the Bulls got Cameron Payne, Joffrey Laverne, and Anthony Morrow back. And Cameron Payne could potentially be the best prospect out of this trade, but Payne wasn't going to get any meaningful playing time with Westbrook on the court. So it makes sense for the Thunder to go through with this trade. But yeah, solid pickup for the Thunder.
Agreed. Really helps. Again, going back to it, really helps with the depth. Going back to what Kevin said about Chicago, I have no idea what they're doing. Cameron Payne's a great prospect, but at the same time, you still kept Jimmy Butler. I mean, you can always still move him in the offseason. I mean, after this year, he's still got 2 years and then a player option after that. So, you got plenty of time to move him. But at the same time, I don't know what they're trying to do here. But, I mean, really, OKC walked out of this golden. They finally put even more weapons around Russell Westbrook, and Doug McDermott should help take the scoring load off of Westbrook's shoulders. Although granted, like Westbrook's still going to be averaging a triple-double every for the rest of the season. But I mean, great move by the Thunder. Bad move by the Bulls, honestly.
Yeah, I would say Joffrey Laverne is an interesting prospect. He's still really young as a big man, and coming over from Europe, I think he still has a lot of NBA growth left in him. I think Cameron Payne, if they like him so much, I mean, that backcourt in Chicago is just muddled. They got Rajon Rondo and Dwayne Wade. Michael Carter-Williams is there. They have Isaiah Canyon, Jaren Grant. And so there's just a lot of players in that backcourt. So high on Payne. If they're so high on him, I don't see him getting a lot of playing time initially, especially with the veterans ahead of him on that depth chart. The Dallas Mavericks made a steal in the trade deadline. They got Nerlens Noel from the Philadelphia 76ers for Andrew Bogut, Justin Anderson, and a first-round pick that is heavily protected, and so it'll probably become 2 second-round picks.
It's an A+ for the Mavs, a C for the Sixers. It was around a B for the first-round pick, but the fact that it'll probably be 2 second-round picks just makes it even worse from the Sixers' standpoint. But Andrew Bogut's most likely going to be bought out. So it's basically the Sixers trading Nerlens Noel for Justin Anderson and 2 second-round picks. And Nerlens Noel is a really young defensive-minded center, and he's going to help the Mavs in the long term. Justin Anderson, I mean, he's averaging 7 points a game. He used to be a good shooter in college, but it didn't really translate into his NBA game. We'll see how it pans out once he plays for the Sixers. But yeah, the Mavs, like you said, they definitely got a steal.
Woo! What an amazing trade for the Mavs. I mean, sorry about, but I mean, wow. I am, as a Mavs fan, I was so ecstatic with, like, the first time I heard it. Nathan was the one that messaged me on it, but I couldn't believe we were able to get that for basically kind of, no offense to Justin Anderson, love the dude. I think he's a bit underrated. He's great. He has got great athleticism, a great defender. But we traded peanuts for Nerlens Noel, and I like, the reason I'm so ecstatic about this trade is because basically Nerlens Noel is like a younger version of Tyson Chandler, and we've seen what Rick Carlisle can do with Tyson Chandler being put in that like good pick and roll, screen and roll 2-man game, and just I'm so stoked to see all the sets and whatnot, and just like throwing it to Nerlens Noel and just seeing all the alley-oops they can do. And even then, like, a lot of people I've been saying, like, oh, he might just, at worst, he might be Brennan Wright. But I mean, Brennan Wright was amazing for the Mavs too when we had him. Like, I think prior to trading for Rajon Rondo, like, the Mavs led the league in number of slam dunks, and now this is just sort of like returning back to that. And then on top of that, Nerlens Noel is a fairly good rim protector for all intents and purposes. He's got he's got the long limbs and whatnot. He's a very active defender overall, and not only that, but he's also got great handles for a big man, which is insane to think about. And not only that, but he's also very good at stealing the ball. So you get pretty much someone that can do everything except for maybe like an outside shot. But even then, I remember recently he seems to have developed a bit of a sky hook, which would be very interesting to see if he can keep that up. And so you pair him with Harrison Barnes, and you have a fairly athletic front court going forward, and it's going to be real exciting going forward. And the nice thing about it is that the Mavs have finally a genuinely like young core that they should be able to win with, especially if they can finally go full tank going forward and get a decent, like a great point guard in this year's draft, which they should be able to, assuming they don't somehow go on a miracle run. I honest to God was shocked to see the amount of protection they put on that first round pick. I have no idea what Colangelo is doing. I mean, this far and away just, you gave him a C. I give him an F. just an F. I don't know how you can't. I don't know how any GM is, especially an NBA GM, can't get a first round pick for someone like Nerlens Noel. I'm excited. I am stoked. I'm stoked out of my mind.
Man, I couldn't tell by listening to you talk there. I think Philadelphia fans are not happy with Jerry Colangelo. I think they made this move earlier in the offseason when they drafted Ben Simmons. They had Joel Embiid coming back, and they had Jahlil Okafor, and they had Dario Saric coming over from Europe. They had to make a move earlier in the offseason because what's happened is value has kind of depleted as on the market as the season has gone on. There's a lot of uncertainty about value, restricted free agent this upcoming offseason, and whether or not Philadelphia could match if another team gave Noel a max offer. But if the trade market pleaded and so down, I don't really know what they had to lose by keeping Noel and waiting for a better deal than what they got from Dallas. I think getting draft picks is nice, and I guess clearing up a little bit of that front court that is helpful. But I think Noel fit well with somebody like Embiid, where I didn't have Embiid in charge on the outside. I think Okafor and Embiid don't really fit well together because they're both guys that need to get the ball down low on the block, and they haven't really played all on the season with how Philadelphia has managed the minutes of the big man. The Rockets made a couple of deals. They got Lou Williams from the Los Angeles Lakers for Corey Brewer and a first-round pick. I think this is a highway robbery, Kevin. What do you think?
Yeah, so the Rockets were definitely the winner from this trade. The Lakers giving up Lou Williams for Corey Brewer and a first-round pick, which is probably going to be a late first-rounder. It pretty much shows they're in full tank mode because Lou Williams was a big reason that the Lakers were actually winning games. And Lou Williams is averaging 19 points a game off the bench, which is crazy to think about because now the Rockets have both Sixth Man of the Year frontrunners in Eric Gordon and Lou Williams. And they also have now 5 of the top 20 three-point shooters in the league in Harden, Ariza, Anderson, Eric Gordon, and now Lou Williams. So it's safe to say the Rockets will continue to try to beat teams by outscoring them and playing no defense. But yeah, it's great pickup for the Rockets.
I mean, that's the D'Antoni way, though. You know, like D'Antoni's always been about outscoring your opponent and having the best defense is a good offense. And honestly, it's hard to argue against it, considering the results he's been able to have this year. This is an amazing trade for. I'll even go so far as to say I actually kind of like it for the Lakers in so much that, again, this helps reinforce the tank. But they at least got a first-round pick out of it too, which is far more than what Philly got for Nerlens Noel. And at the same time, like it's going to be real interesting to see this Lakers team going forward. I mean, they're basically following along with the process of Sam Hinkie. Whether they like it or not, even though Sam Hinkie's not on that team, is not part of that front office. But I mean, they have a fairly interesting young core right now with Julius Randle, D'Angelo Russell, and Brandon Ingram. And I know Jordan Clarkson's been contributing his own thing. But at the same time, I can't really say that the Lakers come away with this looking too bad. And I guess it's a good move by Magic, pulling that Magic. But yeah, going back to it, what you said with having, I mean, they're just going to be raining. The Rockets are now going to just be like raining threes. I mean, we saw what they were able to do against the Pelicans first game after the All-Star break, where it was just a constant barrage. It kind of reminded me of the scene from 300. Where the arrows block out the sun. Well, now it's just going to be threes blocking out the Titantron, I guess. But yeah, no, I really like this deal, and it's going to be. Not to overhype the Rockets. I mean, that's more your guys' thing, I guess, compared to me in terms of like fandom and whatnot. But But I honestly am very excited. I'll be very excited to see the Rockets versus the Golden State Warriors. I honestly think the Rockets make it to the Western Conference Finals for the second time in the last three years. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see who wins the battle of the 3-point shot.
Yeah, so I'm very happy about this trade. Obviously, I'm surprised LA didn't get more than what they got from the Rockets. Corey Brewer in general is a player that he'll give you a lot of energy and he'll give you good defensive play, but he's not going to stretch the floor at all. I think he'll be a good influence on the young Lakers team, but to get a late first round pick, probably in the 25 to 29 range from the Rockets, I'm surprised the Lakers couldn't get more for Lou Williams. But on the Rockets side, definitely pleased. He adds more 3-point shooting, ball handler off the bench, and playmaker that can kind of take the pressure off of James Harden. And like Lou Williams, I heard a stat, he was hitting over 50% on his threes from the corners this year on the Lakers. And imagine the open looks he'll get from the Rockets, as he scored 27 points despite not even practicing with the team. Mike D'Antoni just told him to shoot the ball, and he made 7 threes and scored 27 in that win against New Orleans. I will say one thing on Corey Brewer, we would not have made the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago if it weren't for him. He and Josh Smith really keyed that Game 6 comeback in LA against the Clippers, where they came back from that 20-point deficit and won the game and forced Game 7, and Rockets advanced and came back from the 3-1 deficit. So we'll always have that from Brewer, but he just didn't fit in with Mike D'Antoni's scheme. He was a Kevin McHale acquisition from his days in Minnesota, and he couldn't hit open 3-pointers and didn't fit D'Antoni's system.
But just to further add to the Corey Brewer, that's like kind of the second time that Corey Brewer's helped key a comeback for a Texas team against an LA team. I remember back during Dallas's championship run when we were playing when first game against the Lakers, and we were down quite a lot, and then we plugged him in the third quarter, and he just like his energy was like infectious and helped key back that comeback and lead in a sense like starting from there led us to sweeping the Lakers and winning the entire thing. But yeah, I mean Corey's been a good like a spark plug off the bench, but I mean he's always struggled with developing a shot.
So the Rockets made another couple additional moves. They traded KJ McDaniels and Tyler Ennis away, basically just to clear some cap room. I think they're targeting somebody like Andrew Bogut as a free agent to potentially come in here, and I think that would be huge for the team. They really, as we mentioned, they need an additional rebounder and shot blocker inside, in addition to Nene and Capella.
Well, as the resident Andrew Bogut expert for this year, I mean, hopefully you guys do better with him than he did with us. I mean, he absolutely loathed his time with the Mavs, going as far as to say that this was a bunch of bird crap. I mean, that being said, like I think part of it was just like he was frustrated with being on a losing team, and I think finally being on a winning team that's got a good chance of making a deep run in the playoffs should help reinvigorate him, and it should help also at the very least. Hopefully he's a good influence on Clint Capella as Clint develops further. I definitely think they should go all in with trying to get Bogut on this Rockets team. And worst comes to worst, I mean, there's at least backup plan of probably maybe trying to sign someone like Tiago Splitter, who also got waived, bought out by the Philadelphia 76ers. But yeah, what's your take, Kevin?
Yeah, I think the addition of Bogut to the Rockets front court will definitely help their defense and rebounding. And that's something the Rockets desperately need, and it will definitely help them come playoff time. Regarding the trade of KJ McDaniels to the Nets, I think KJ, he was an extremely talented and athletic player. I mean, we saw flashes of that when he was on Philadelphia, but it was pretty clear his skill set didn't really fit with how the Rockets play. He could dunk and finish at the rim, but he couldn't really shoot or defend, which is what the Rockets were looking for in a role player. So I'm sad to see him go, but I think he'll thrive in the Nets offense where he's sure to get a lot of playing time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and one final NBA note. this week. So the Lakers made some front office changes. Owner Jeannie Buss fired her brother, Jim Buss, as well as general manager Mitch Kupchak. And we've mentioned Magic Johnson was named the new president of basketball operations. So what do you guys think of the moves right before the trade deadline, and how do you think Magic will fare?
Yeah, so I think everybody pretty much saw this coming. Magic Johnson, I know he's been gunning for this position for a while now, and now that he's the new president of basketball operations, I think he'll do just fine. The first few trades didn't look so good for him. I mean, giving up Lou Williams, the sixth man of the year, for a Corey Brewer and a late first round pick, but given the context and how they're trying to tank, it's not too bad. Yeah, I think Magic Johnson as the new president is definitely going to make the Lakers a more attractive destination in free agency. And like I mentioned before, Paul George is one of the big free agents on the market this offseason. And having Magic Johnson as the president will definitely attract Paul George to the Lakers. He's already interested in joining that franchise anyways. So, yeah, I think having new change in leadership, Magic Johnson as the president, I think the Lakers will do just fine.
Yeah, agreed. For the most part, I mean, I'm not as down as on Magic after these first few trades. I think he should be fairly decent. I mean, when I heard the move, I wouldn't say I was surprised as much as just sort of I wouldn't say it was Game of Thrones type stuff, but it was just sort of like, whoa, it's a good way to rekindle any sort of a sibling rivalry that you had before, I guess. I mean, I guess the hope is that it sort of reinstills sort of the tradition and sort of the prestige of the Lakers that's been kind of missing ever since Kobe's left.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say Magic must be very good at interviews. I think he's done a lot of things since his playing career has ended. He tried to do a late night talk show. He's been on ESPN. He's been on TNT. He's been the Lakers coach, and he's failed at all those, but he keeps getting new gigs. And so I do think the star power of Magic and whether or not he'll be running the general manager and the day-to-day operations is yet to be seen. I think there's an opportunity for somebody like Sam Hinkie, who's been out of basketball this year. If you were to get him as a general manager and to definitely has the experience of building a team from scratch, if the Lakers aren't able to attract the big free agents out there, I think they'll have to go the draft route and build that way. I think there's an opportunity there. Thank you so much, Kevin, for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, Nathan. So, other sports news, not much. Major League Baseball made a rule change announcement. They basically got rid of the 4-pitch intentional walk rule. You can just signal the first base. It's all part of their pace of play initiatives. They're also trying to making the strike zone a little higher. What do you make of all these potential rules changes?
I mean, I think they're fine for what they are, and I think that's a move in the right direction. But that being said, I think it's still like very like they're too small move as of right now in terms of trying to pick up the pace of the game. On it, because honestly, like how many times do you see an intentional walk in a game? Like it's usually like what, the ninth, eighth, or even seventh inning. It's usually towards the end, and by that point, like you've kind of like lost like half the people who started off watching the game. But that also being said, I mean, it definitely, like I said before, it's a good move in the right direction. But I think if MLB is worried about like trying to appeal to younger generations, or like the millennials, I guess, as they're wanting to call it. I mean, the bigger thing going forward is to just like try to market their young stars, specifically people like Chris Bryant, Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, even Carlos Correa, that you guys have. Just trying to be better about getting these guys and trying to use these guys to sell what MLB has, which is just, and that's always been like the big draw for baseball and it's never been about like sort of necessarily about like the rules or the style of play. It's always been about like sort of like these legends, these like mythic figures, like Babe Ruth or Hank Aaron, Joe DiMaggio. Like that's always been like what made baseball sort of like so integral to the fabric of America, which has been just and obviously Jackie Robinson. How can I forget Jackie Robinson? I mean, Jackie Robinson has now become synonymous with like the civil rights movement for his contributions to helping break down the barriers in sports. That's the big thing for MLB going forward, is just trying to sort of like find these young generations that people can, I guess, sort of identify with and be, I guess, as inclusive as they can be in trying to go forward. What's your take, Quan?
Yeah, the 4-pitch intentional walk thing, that happens, I think, once every 3 games. And so if you're saying that's to improve the pace of play, I mean, I don't really think it's that interesting to watch either way. I mean, you have where the pitcher like accidentally throws one over the plate and the hitter gets the hit, but that happens very rarely too. So, I mean, sure, if you want to do this, I'm fine with that. I don't really think you should change the strike zone fundamentals of the game and to kind of artificially manufacture more offense. I don't agree with that. And I don't see that getting passed either, especially with all the pitchers, which would affect them directly on every pitch. I think they should probably do something with the mound visits, because, I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous. Sometimes you see change pitchers and go to the bullpen, they go to commercial, and then like 5 minutes later they come out 2 pitches or 2 balls, and then the catcher runs out there like, wait, what do you want to throw? It's like, we just had 5 minutes of warm-ups, and then now we're having another mound visit. Like, the guy walks, and then you have another mound visit to talk about the next guy. I think they should probably limit that. I don't agree with changing the strike zone, and the pitch clock to me seems a little artificial too. I don't time in between pitches is really that big of a deal that you need to have clock out behind home plate. I think that really distracts from the game. But let's go into some spring training updates. The Astros had their first game today. Roy Oswalt was in camp this week, and he was working with top pitching prospect Francis Martez on a changeup. And so Martez is September call-up, but he's probably at least a year away. But it's good to see some of the Astros veterans and legends coming in and helping the young players. How about the Rangers side?
For sure. I mean, you know, Roy Oswald's also a former Ranger, so there's that. But yeah, no. On the Rangers side, biggest news right now, aside from like obviously like finally making the Napoli signing official, has been Josh Hamilton, 2010 MVP. His knee had to be checked by doctors, but now has been signed off as structurally sound, which honestly kind of sounds even more terrifying going forward, because I mean, he's not a building, he's a human being, you know. But I mean, it's nice to at least hear that. I mean, again, it's questionable whether or not he's going to be even able to contribute at all to the major league team. And I think this like looking at it right now, this might be his last season, his last chance to play baseball. You know, and I'm pulling for the guy. I hope he does well. It's been a long, strange journey for Josh Hamilton, but I mean, hopefully he can finally win that World Series ring this year.
So final shout outs. I have a couple. So shout out to Jared Allen. On the screen, you can see the dunk he had against West Virginia was potentially the dunk of the year. It was absolutely sick. And so if you haven't seen it, click on the link on the screen. It's amazing. Yeah, so second shout out is to the Houston Dynamo. So they've had a really successful preseason so far. They beat New England and New York City FC, and they drew the other day. They're actually playing in the Desert Diamond Cup final today against Colorado Rapids. And so just watching a few minutes of their preseason game, the quickness that they can counterattack now. They added so much speed on that side of the ball. And so, I mean, this MLS season starts next week, and this team is trying to get back to the playoffs after missing it for the last couple of years. And I think they have a good shot. I think there's a lot of youth on that team, and the speed that has been added has just been so foreign for a Dynamo fan to see, because that's been something they've been lacking for years. And frankly, since they've come to Houston, they haven't had that speed. Final shout out is another soccer shout out. So Claudio Ranieri, he was the coach for Leicester City that won the Premier League last year, and Leicester City sacked him this past week. I think they did him dirty. I think for that team, the biggest Premier League upset in history, and you could probably say the biggest sports upset in history, taking that team to winning the Premier League and then firing him 10 months later. Granted, Leicester hasn't had a good season, but I think given his age and what he's done with the team, he deserves better than what he got from that team.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's just, I mean, I understand that it's a like Premier League is usually a pressure cooker, but that's insane. I mean, especially if you're like Leicester City, where, I mean, like barely anything happens. And like finally the first thing that's ever like happened to you that's like been good for like ever. And then you pretty much like, you're like, let's move on. I don't understand it. I really do not understand that type of thinking. But I mean, whatever. I mean, they've got to deal with the consequences of that. For me, shout outs, I guess first, going back to wrestling, I guess shout out to Bayley for sticking up against Stephanie McMahon, who asked her to turn over her title, and she was like, nah, screw it. That decision has caused a lot of controversy, since a lot of people wanted her to get her first championship at WrestleMania. While that kind of takes away that opportunity, I don't think that ruins her character or her arc going forward. I mean, it's just going to be, the big thing for them is just going to be trying to find some way to make sure that they still are able to garner sympathy for Bayley, since I think she can be an incredible protagonist for the company going forward. But also going forward, they just need to sort of find a new goal for her in order to try to have her achieve that at either this WrestleMania or next WrestleMania. Maybe something built around her trying to just like, okay, yeah, I'm the champion, but you guys don't respect me as a champion, so I want to earn your respect at WrestleMania, something like that. Shout out to Alexa Bliss. So unfortunately, Naomi had to turn over her championship, which was, again, the first time she ever won it in her 8 years with the company. But due to injury, she was unable to defend it within 30 days, so she had to turn it over. And so for the second time within a year, Alexa Bliss, who has won the SmackDown Women's Championship, and she's looking more up and up going forward. WWE also released a video pretty much like detailing her basically her entire life story up until now, including her struggles with anorexia and how she actually came close, like within 24 hours of dying due to her eating disorder. And it looks like and it's an absolutely incredible story. If you want to find out more about Alexa Bliss, definitely do that and see how she's sort of like advocating for people who are struggling with eating disorders to try to go get help. It's going to be hard to root against her, especially as she's supposed to be a bad guy, and she's been so good as a bad guy ever since for the past 2 years. But I mean, it's going to be hard to root against her now after finding out about that. Also, shout out, I guess, to women's basketball in terms of just we want you guys to start winning again. Literally ever since Evan was last on this podcast, they've been on a losing streak, losing the last 3 games.
Thanks, Evan.
Yeah. You've ruined their good mojo. They've gone from losing by 1 point to Oklahoma in Oklahoma to losing by 3 points against Baylor in Austin, and then last night they lost by 4 points against Iowa State in Austin. And by this point, if the trend keeps going, they'll be losing 15 points to Kansas while at the Frank Irwin Center. So thanks a lot, Evan. You've jinxed them. I guess also shout out to UT, to Texas men's baseball, starting off fairly decently. I mean, the Clemens brothers have been on a tear ever since the season has started. They've been just hitting bomb after bomb after bomb. Apparently, it's important to have corrective eyewear to play baseball, especially if you usually wear glasses, as one of the Clemens brothers is finding out now. So go figure. But yeah, that's pretty much about it.
That about wraps it up for this week. I will talk to you next week, Nathan.
Talk to you then, man. Take care.